Hi everyone. I've been getting a lot of questions about assignment 2, which is great. But I just thought I would kind of check in and provide a little bit of clarification on, some of the specific components and the expectations, because I'm a little worried that the scope is getting too big for some of you, and that I really want to help you focus a little bit. So, as a researcher, I think about everything in kind of framed within a research study. And so, if you think about a health impact assessment, it is really a research study. You're looking to evaluate or assess change. So the change we're looking at is the change in health. And, the driver of change is this policy or this program or this act or, the piece of work that you guys are evaluating. So, when I think about, forming a research study, I think about, what my hypothesis is and also my theoretical framework. And that for me is kind of the foundation and where I start. And so thinking about a health impact assessment, those pieces are really built into the logic model. So, that might be a really good place for people to start is, drawing an arrow diagram between, the policy and the activities and, the pieces of work that policy creates, and then the impacts or the change that those pieces of work have. In some cases, you start from the policy and you work towards the change. But in other cases, it may be easier for you to start with the impact and then kind of work backwards. Depending on the size of the policy and the size of the program, it may be very overwhelming to think about all the ways in which this piece of work can create, activities and outputs and change. So, rather you could think about starting at, what are, 2 to 3 meaningful areas of health impact that you want to work on? What are these pieces that you want to assess? So do you want to assess, and thinking about assessment from a public health perspective. So, are you focusing on, mental health, service use? Are you focusing on housing? Are you focusing on, employment rates? What is that change in health? And then you can work backwards to think about, okay, well, what are the activities that create that change? And then how does, the policy drive those changes in activity, especially for work that has a huge scope. That'll help you kind of narrow down a little bit. So that's kind of where I start. And then you think about, then you can go to the literature and say, okay, I'm really going to focus on these health impacts. And then reading the literature, so going up to your screening section and saying, oh wow, this piece of work has a huge breadth of impact, and these are all the things that this piece of work can create change in a meaningful way. However, this health impact assessment is going to focus on these specific areas because whatever your rationale is for that. So that might be a way for a few of you to kind of narrow your focus a little bit. So then, you kind of start in the middle, and then you go and use the literature as a means to justify that. And then thinking about building from there. Okay, so who is the population that is going to be, affected by this? And then in that scoping section, that's where you dive into why you chose those specific health impacts, why this population of interest is specific to you, and you kind of draw back on the literature section that you used kind of to for your rationale of your theoretical framework or your logic model, and you kind of tease that out a little bit more. And so I've, had, and then, and this is then you get into the piece around health equity, and, based on, hearing from most of you around what your topics are, I think you'll all be able to touch on a little bit of health equity. And some of it is going to be a significant, health equity impact assessment. And some of it will depend on the health impact you choose, or the population of interest you choose. And so, the scoping section is really to create a theoretical framework for change, and rationalize, discuss that why, dig into a little bit why those health impacts occur in that group. And, you really want to set that up. So section 1 sets up your logic model. And then the text for section 2 really sets up your indicators. So the appraisal section is really focused on how are you going to measure change. And so, the tools that we use to measure or define things, portray values on health. They portray impacts on health. And so, this section is to say, okay, I'm looking at, job loss as an impact on health, and I'm going to look at employment rates in this sector as your indicator. And that fits very well with your theoretical framework, because you've set up the relationship between the work that you're evaluating and the impact on health. So, for me, I think about a health impact assessment like a research proposal, because that's where my knowledge lies, and my way of thinking comes in. And so, this is really an assignment for you to think about impacts on health from a social ecological model of health framework, and so, really important that this whole piece of work is really grounded within that lens. How are you defining health? How are you defining the social environmental context? And so when you're thinking about, the work that you're assessing, the policy, the program, ensure that that relationship between the work and the activity and the impact is really grounded in that model of health, because I'm looking for you to have that lens. So we're looking for changes in the environment, changes in the social environment, the physical environment, the natural environment, any sorts of impact on the environment that creates impacts on health. So, I hope that allows you to really think this through a little bit more, and really not think this through a little bit more, but think this through in a bit of a more focused way, because you can't measure everything. And I'm not looking for you to measure everything. I'm looking for you to justify why these, think 2 to 3 areas of impact are important, and how you're going to assess those. And this health impact assessment is like a proposal. I'm not asking you to do any of the evaluation work, but I'm asking you to set up the rationale for, it's like a research proposal, but just framed within a social environmental model of health context. So happy to read more drafts, happy to have more discussions. I've been homesick for the last few days, and so I apologize. There's a few that I've been a little bit late catching up on. But anyways, I'm here, and I'm happy to Zoom, or I'm happy to have a phone call, or I'm happy to go back and forth on drafts. But just thinking about maybe starting in the middle, and then using the first section to justify that, and then thinking about the third section as a way to measure that model. Okay, thanks.